we are going to continue to see a fracturing of the ruling class. And typically, in revolutionary times, they occur at a point in which the ruling class is indeed fighting with each other. That is a choke point right there, my friends. The insurrection was a kind of, political choke point. Would you agree? It's sort of like, okay, Kevin, we get it, dude. No need to spam the chat, you little dingleberry. I wouldn't have called that a revolution. Remember that revolutions are for the oppressed class, and coups are for the oppressive class. And in the case of January 6th, had Trump stayed in power, that would have been a coup in the United States government against itself. And just like, in Ukraine, the Maidan uprising, these are uncertain times. They might have even started with a leftist angle, crowded a public square and demanded something about, a relevant political issue. But, like we say, it's uncertain times. Things, other elements can creep into the movement and co-opt it. We've seen that in Ukraine, and we saw that in Egypt. Al-Sisi, who deposed the previous fascist. It was like they were trying to get rid of the fascist, and then they got a fucking military dictatorship out of the deal. It's not always just like, let's just poke some holes and hope for the best. Sometimes it can turn out worse than where we were. So I think there's a lot, that's why the theory is important, and we have to know what we're doing. Who's waiting in the wings? Because there's never a power vacuum. There's always some group, some interest, some, part of the section of the population that's going to come in and seize power. And so we got to make sure that it's the right people. There is no such thing as a power vacuum. Kamala Harris. I mean, just these two, she looks like George Washington right there. She's the worst. They're both just the worst. They are the worst. Biden, Harris, the dream for a better America. You know what else is interesting is Tel Aviv. No, it's not Tel Aviv. That's occupied Jaffa. Or Haifa. Is it Jaffa or Haifa? And then Judea and Samaria. No, that's occupied West Bank. And then it's like, Israel. No, that's occupied Palestine. Bitch.
About 5 seconds, because that's what we do in America. I think the country should take a moment.
Look at this chud. This guy is such a State Department stool pigeon. Look at him. What a he looks like a bald eagle. He looks like a little bald eagle ass bitch.
He stood in the breach for us at a moment of creeping autocracy.
He stood in the breach for us in a moment of creeping autocracy. Remember, because autocracy is bad. What is it? Isn't that like it just means like dictatorship, right? Yeah. We already have this, folks. A system of government by one person with absolute power. It's just like how you should think about the invisible man, okay? Or the invisible hand of the free market. It's better to think of like something like the stock market being controlled by one person and understand it in that regard. And we have a system of government that is autocratic. It may not be one person with absolute power, but it is one class with absolute power, and that one class that can be thought of as a singular entity. A country, state, or society governed by one person. Domineering rule. I mean, you could just say domineering rule or control. Yeah, that's America for you. A dictatorship of corporations. A dictatorship of the rich. It's only bad when we say the proletarian dictatorship, right? Corporate dictatorship is absolutely fine with most Americans.
This is the first time in 56 years, since 1968, that a major party will nominate a presidential candidate that didn't enter any primaries.
Wow, that's not since 1968? I've got another date for you.
How will Joe Biden be seen 56 years from now?
Well, how do we look at 56 years ago in 1967? Let's talk about 56 years. 56 years ago? Why do we care about 56 years from now? What about 56 years ago, when Israel violated international laws and has been doing ever since by the international community? I know it's a different story, but it's the same story. Who gives a shit about Joe Biden? Genocide and Biden? Get the fuck out of here. I don't give a
have been written about him and what he did in this moment.
He's the worst. Yeah, John, whatever you're about to come out of your mouth is pure dog shit. Because all we need to know about Joe Biden is that he oversaw and commandeered and was minutely involved in the planning of one of the worst crimes in human history.
President Biden has.
He's the only, how about this? 56 years from now, we'll remember that Joe Biden is the only U.S. president to ever be sued for genocide. Not to say that other presidents haven't, been, guilty of the crime of genocide. You could think about Richard Nixon in Cambodia. Down there in Cambodia, I mean, all of them are guilty of it, or at least sanctioning it, or supporting it, or funding. Even Carter, the Timorese genocide. None of them. It's an institutional imperative that the president should be a war criminal. Must be. If the president could just not leave his office, not do anything, just could sit and then let the world go on, he'd be guilty of all these things, just because that's just how the nature of the U.S. government works. But it's pretty wild, pretty blatant, right? That the only United States of all the egregious offenses, human rights violations and war crimes, crimes of aggression that the United States has committed in the post-World War II era, that Joe Biden stands alone as the only one being sued for genocide by a U.S. NGO. Yeah, Bush, of course, yeah, the Iraqis. I mean, he must be, when he's up late painting, he must be thinking about them dead Iraqis.
We were a nation in the grips of a global pandemic.
This guy is just like a U.S. propagandist. He's a mouthpiece for the corporate class. He's hitting all the notes. This air of fucking arrogance to his words, like trying to put some perspective, some context to this man, this president, his presidency, his moment. He's not even dead yet. He's not even not president yet, but they're already saying, like, just trying to revere him, leave a good note for him, let everybody know, put some context to it, wrap it all up for us. Okay, what's next?
We were a nation where trust and faith in institutions was in a precipitous decline. Consensus was facing an existential crisis. And President Biden, who beginning in his 20s, entered the public arena.
This man started in his 20s, okay? He was sucking corporate in his 20s, son. Let me tell you something, son. Until you take that for the corporate class, you don't know a goddamn thing about Joe Biden.
I'm going to steal this quote from Nick Kristof, who mentioned it in one of his recent pieces. It's attributed to Lenin, although there's argument about that. There are decades when nothing happens and weeks.
She's quoting Vladimir Lenin? NBC News is quoting Vladimir Ilyich Lenin? What the fuck is going on? Am I being punked?
When decades happen. It's
Right.
been one hell of a week.
NBC is Marxist, y'all. Dude, you just quoted a communist on NBC News. What the I don't need any more proof to say that Joe Biden is a Marxist. This is what I'm talking about. You see? Fucking Marxist NBC News quoting a communist in their defense of Joe Biden, who's also a dirty Marxist. This is what I'm telling you guys. The left is creeping in to all of our institutions. The moment we start talking about Vladimir Ilyich Lenin and adulating Commie Joe, we're cooked as a nation, okay? We need to fight back. That's why Project 2025 needs your endorsement, okay? Sign up for the newsletter. We have to take back our country. We got to make America great again.
Nixon ordered Cambodian genocide. Clinton sent cruise missiles to Sudan, people died. Gave the orders to do drones.